Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I extend a very warm welcome to all of you to the 11th NITI in-house lecture series. Today's topic is of great importance to India's growth story. It is India's tradition of conservation and sustainability. As you know, this lecture series began literally 11 months back, and from then we have looked at, deliberated on themes which resonate with India's growth story. And I'm sure all of you are eagerly waiting today for one of the most important issues that face India and the world, which is the climate crisis. As you know, that Honorable PM in COP26 had given the clarion call of talking about mission life, because everybody understands that if you're going to deal with this mindless consumerism and throwaway culture, I don't think the world is quite close to the brink, as all of us understand, as we see threats, whether it is Sikkim or the Himachal that is at the backdrop as we speak today in this lecture series. And India, interestingly, NITI Aayog had ideated and worked on this subject of mission life and incubated this idea after the directions given by the Honorable PM, and based on that, a lot of work has begun in the country and across the world. As the Vishwaguru, we have the bounden duty to look at issues that matter to the world and perhaps draw deep into India's traditions and perhaps pave the way for the world to look at a better world for us, future citizens. So with this brief introduction about our NITI lecture series, and I'm sure all of us are eagerly waiting for today's lecture is not one that we every day have the privilege of seeing. And therefore, without much ado, I'll request our CEO, Mr. BVR Subramaniamji, to please come and give the welcome address. And at the same time, I would request Mr. Gurumurthy, today's guest of honor, to please come on the stage, on the dais. Sir. I would also request my colleague. Sir, we are indeed honored to have you, sir. So please have a seat. Sir, before you give the welcome address, I would request you to give a small token of our love, affection, and gratitude to today's esteemed speaker, sir. A small plant as a token of our regard for you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Respected Shri Gurumurthy ji, Vice Chairman, members of NITI Aayog, secretaries of the government, representatives of the UN, other dignitaries, colleagues from NITI Aayog. It's a great honor to welcome Shri Gurumurthy ji to this lecture. This is something we have been waiting for a while. It was scheduled for 29th of last month, but considering that we had an event of the Prime Minister on 30th, we had to postpone it by a few days, and Shri Gurumurthy has been kind enough to come and speak to us today. A man like Shri Gurumurthy doesn't need much of an introduction, but for form's sake, and for those of you who are, say, below 30 or even 35, 40, who may not recollect, his role in the past in terms of shaping Indian polity, Indian business, I think it's been phenomenal. He's a chartered accountant by profession, but he has a deep understanding of policy and economics. His write-ups on politics, economy, business, they are featured in the most eminent publications around the world. His journalism, particularly his investigating journalism skills, have gained him a lot of respect and have been immensely appreciated. He has campaigned very furiously against corruption in very high places. He's also exposed illegal relationships between corporate giants. He's not a man who minces his words, nor does he pull his punches when he has to actually say something or do something. His career in journalism has been vast and widespread, and this covers over 4 decades of experiences. He's also a visiting faculty at IIT Mumbai and speaks on economics, finance, and management. He's also a distinguished professor of legal anthropology in Shastra University in Tanjavur. Apart from being a chartered accountant, he's been a corporate advisor to the biggest business houses in India of long standing. It'll be very trite on my part and cliched to say that he's one of the most powerful persons. I think he is a very powerful person because he has very deliberately avoided power. And by not seeking power, he actually has been one of the most influential people in Indian polity, and I think that's something which is a hallmark of Mr. Gurumurthy. He has openly said many times, I'm not a seeker of power and I don't go anywhere near it. He is also, on the advice of his guru, the Paramacharya of Kanchipuram, has kept away from all positions of power. It is not that they have not been offered to him, but has kept away from that, be it in government, be it in corporates, or be it in other areas of life. He is one of the founders of the Vivekananda International Foundation, which is an independent think tank which promotes quality research and also studies on a large number of policy issues. It's also a platform for dialogue, for conflict resolution, and he's also not only the chair of the Board of Trustees, but he's a very, very in-depth thinker. Shri Gurumurthy draws his inspiration from the deep heritage of our, I don't know, people say 5,000, 10,000, depends on what view you have, a much older heritage and civilization that we have in India. This is not a nation that was born 50 years ago, 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. It goes far, far too deep. And for whatever reasons in the past, maybe because of our education systems, maybe the way society has moved, we sometimes tend to lose our deep roots which are there, although they're imbibed in our own practices. And I think today, this lecture which we are speaking about is something, and let me give you an anecdotal quote. He met the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister says, why are you telling this only to me? You should be speaking to a larger audience about the kind of stuff you have been telling me. He's going to talk not about life in a very narrow sense, which is lifestyle for environment. He's going to talk about Indian heritage, about how conservation, sustainability are completely intertwined in our lives, and from our childhoods, in societies, in families, from generation to generation. We look forward to you, sir, and thank you very much for taking your time to come all the way from Chennai for this. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO sir, for that introduction. But I don't want to lose the privilege and honor of introducing you once again, sir. It's very rare for officers like me to be on the same dais as you. I think that very few would have straddled the worlds from accountancy to journalism, from economics to public policy. It's very rare indeed, and with equal aplomb he has done this. And you have been a thought leader, and your views on vision of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and the importance of our Indian culture in shaping the world's realities. I want to read out from one of your books a quote, "Development through Culture, Concept Dynamics Road Ahead," wherein you had said the importance of culture in your words. Culture is a collective word. It nurtures people, nurtures communities, empires, and nations. It is an identity, not only in clothes and art forms, but also in thought and behavior, and in the way we relate to the known and the unknown. And today we are going to enter into this beautiful world of Indian culture and how it can inspire us to have a worldview which could help us face the climate crisis in our own unique way and perhaps guide the world in the process. And I don't want to stand between you, the audience, and the brilliant speaker that we have today. Sir, may I request you now to please address the audience. Thank you, sir.
Namaskarams to all. You know, it is very easy to get a speaker like me, but it is very difficult to assemble an audience of this kind. And before an audience, when you introduced me, sky high, you set the bar. And I have to rise above the bar to make you understand that what has been said about me is correct. It's a difficult job. This subject is not an easy subject, because we have a huge backlog of thinking. Unless we sear through the confusions created by the huge backlog of thinking that has gone into our system, by our education, by our public discourse, by our media, it will be difficult for me to make my point. So it's not an easy task. The topic, of course, does not fully capture what I want to say. I will be sharing with you thoughts which will touch upon global order, to environment, to culture, to economics. Of course, it will be from a helicopter perspective, as I will relate to you. NITI Aayog is a think tank, but I always believed it is not a government think tank, because no think tank can be owned by anybody, including the government, because thoughts belong to all, and you are supposed to be understanding, expounding, explaining, and articulating those thoughts. It is from that perspective I will be talking. I will not be constrained by the current compulsions of politics or public discourse. I will be speaking what is in my mind about how we should be looking at the future from where we are today. As someone who had some distant association with the conceptualization of NITI Aayog, I would like you to recall the cabinet resolution which was passed on the 1st of January, which is, of course, I don't find it very often exhibited in your aims and objects, but there are 4 principles in it which I think is very important, which I will integrate into my presentation today. One is social capital. Many people do not know what is it. Financial capital belongs to the man who has money. Intellectual capital belongs to the person who has the brain. Social capital belongs to the society. You are only a beneficiary of it. This is the most important thing, which, of course, people like M.L. Durkheim spoke in the last decades of the 19th century. But it has again come back to life after Francis Fukuyama took it up in 1990s, and now it is very current. But it has not become very current in the policy discourse or in the public discourse or in the discussions or in the media. I have to park my thoughts on that. Then respect and reverence for nature is something which has been integrated into the NITI Aayog by the cabinet resolution. And the third is rejection of one-size-fit-all model of development, which has been in vogue from 1951 thanks to the courtesy of the United Nations, which mandated that the whole world will have to follow one model of development. You have to discard your philosophies, your way of life, your culture, and you have to come to one way and view and style of life. That is what makes the world and world economy. Of course, the world has been functioning on this basis, and I will touch upon it a bit. And finally, it has to be a Bharatiya approach for development, which has also been defined as what will work in and for India. This is the most important thing. What will work in and for India is the most challenging job of the NITI Aayog. With this background, I will try and go into my presentation. It has certain introductory references which I will give now. Today's talk will be based on 5 geopolitical assumptions. Of course, Mr. Doval is sitting here. It will be too presumptive for me to talk about global assumptions. But anyhow, I dare to talk because he may correct me where I am wrong. So, 5 global geopolitical assumptions and 4 principles around which my talk will evolve, which is important in the context of where India stands today and what it can do for the world and where the world stands. The world is standing on a precipice. It's in a state of crisis, which many people do not know. The last 50 years, the way I have looked at the world and what I see today, it's not a paradigm shift. It is something, it's an uncontrolled fall. And I don't know where we are leading to, but in this context, what India can do, a stable society like India, a stable nation like India, it may never have had a stable state, but it had a stable society, stable culture, stable value systems, which has been able to pass on for 5,000 years or more. Swami Vivekananda said, if Vedavyasa came and took a travel across the country, he will find some of the traffic signals which he found at that time. That is the continuity which was assured to our civilization by our great forefathers. So, in this background, what are the geopolitical assumptions on the basis of which I will be presenting my thoughts? One, the post-World War and Cold War order is in ICU today. Second, there is no alternative to it in sight. I don't think anyone even claims an alternative. Third, there is diffusion of power taking place at a fast pace at the global level. In fact, many European think tanks have said by 2030 there will be no hegemonic power. It will all be shared power, and you can understand what power, when it gets shared, it is like a coalition government without head. So you must understand that we are moving towards a very, very difficult period in the geopolitical context. In this, the world will not be a linear extension of the world today into the future. It will not be that yesterday it happened like this, tomorrow it will happen like this. It's just impossible. If we are going into an uncharted territory, and from this my first principle emerges, which is very important because I have been studying the Indian civilization, Indian freedom movement, and the thoughts which have shaped India through great men, because now we don't see such great men. We have not been, our universities have not been able to produce a Vivekananda or an Aurobindo. We have not been able to produce even a C.V. Raman, a scientist who got Nobel Prize. Our institutions produce only carbon copies of intellectualism elsewhere, so it doesn't develop original thoughts which is needed to trigger a civilization. So from this point of view, I want to quote Maharishi Aurobindo. You know, when we were fighting the emergency in those days, in 1975, we were all underground fighting the emergency. There was no freedom, courts were shut, and the media was crawling, and the Supreme Court has virtually abandoned the country. In this situation, we were looking for where to get our adrenaline flowing. So at that time, my mind went to Maharishi Aurobindo. In 1909, he came back from, at that time the entire revolutionary movement had collapsed. And so he came to Pondicherry. Between 1909 and 1919, till Mahatma Gandhi came, was the darkest period in Indian freedom movement. The revolutionary movement having been crushed, there was no alternative that developed till Mahatma Gandhi came. It was in that period that in 1909, when Aurobindo came to Pondicherry, everybody thought Aurobindo was such a great mind, he will show us the way. But he was looking at a mystic called Kulachami, who was a madman. He will laugh, he will cry, he will throw stones. Aurobindo said, he is the man who will show me the way. Everybody thought Aurobindo has gone bonkers. But one day, when Aurobindo was sitting with his colleagues and taking a cup of tea, he came and lifted the teacup in front of Aurobindo and emptied the teacup and put the tea cup and went away. Aurobindo said, I have got my message. I said, you lost the tea. Please tell us what is your message. The colleagues asked. Aurobindo said, he has asked me to empty my thoughts and begin thinking afresh. That is what produced the Aurobindo which we saw later. Unless, in the context in which we are today, we empty our thoughts, most of which is irrelevant today, irrelevant for future. Most of it was irrelevant for us. We will not be able to find where to move, how to move. This is the first important principle on which I will be talking. Second is, I read long ago a compilation of economic textbook in which there was a quote from a Pakistani economist that the most obvious thing is the most difficult thing to detect. Then he referred to Isaac Newton, apple falling. So everybody assumed apple will fall. Only Isaac Newton asked why it didn't go up. So the Isaac Newton apple fall fact is an assumed fact. But what made it fall? What is the science behind it? Only Isaac Newton went into it. So I later found that this actually one Isaac Asimov, who was a Russian thinker, who was the author of this great quote, and the Pakistani only plagiarized it. Anyhow, the fact is, it is only through him I got to know this. The third thing is, this is the second principle. Most of us are not aware of the obvious facts which I am going to mention to you. Even I was not aware 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Unless you know these facts, and these are obvious facts, they don't require researches. And unless you know these facts, you will not be able to know what is your problem, what is the solution for yourself and for the world. The third thing is, take an integrated helicopter view in a world of high-speed specialization. Everything is specialized. Today my friend Balbir Punj told me he took his wife to an eye specialist. He said, sir, there are 8 specialists for you. All the 8 will have to see and come to a conclusion what is the problem with your wife's eyes. You can understand the super specialization that is confusing the world. Whether it is good or bad, we don't know. But specialization is making the people go into alleys, and they are on the ground when they have to be so high up to understand what the comprehensive problems are. And the last point I make is decontextualize yourself. We have to take a long-term view. The current contemporary situation is arresting us, and we have to take a long-term view. There is one Palika who wrote a book, an introduction to the book Vedas. He also comes from the Aurobindo school of thought. In that he says that I am entering a house where the house is on fire, and I see a woman and two children on the one room and the old manuscripts on the other, and I can say only one of the two. He said, I steeled my heart and went to save the old manuscript. Now, this is a very extreme example, but we are saddled with this issue every day. What will happen day after tomorrow, we are not able to think. So, we have to decontextualize yourself. So, today this talk will be based on the geopolitical assumptions and will center around the 4 principles. Now, I will immediately go into asking a very provocative question. Whether in the context of these assumptions and principles, the Prime Minister's G20 motto of one family, one earth, one family and one future is an abstract philosophy, a slogan, or has it the backing of some facts? If you answer this, then you have answered the issue about conservation and sustainability, because these are all thoughts which have flown from the West with their own meaning. Now the entire environment ecology has been replaced by 1.5 degrees. Nobody talks about environment or ecology. It has become mechanical. Everything, just like economics has become econometrics. It is no more a social science or a philosophy. It is econometrics. It is equations. Likewise, we have reduced the entire ecology and environment into mere equations. There is no human element in it. There is no environmental consciousness in it. There is no role for human beings. It is all subject to regulation. Industries, governments, they will all have. I mean, we have completely moved away from where the problem is. So, we have to understand that the Prime Minister is taking us back to where the problem is and the solution is. Unless we understand this, the role that India can play and should play, and where the world will expect us to play the role, because we have a functioning model. That's what I am going to tell you. And so the Prime Minister's motto is backed by facts which are of the Newtonian falling apple type. This is what I want to share with you today. Now let us look at the Newtonian falling apple facts. First, there are 3 sets of global facts. These are all very well known. I mean, many of you may even have seen it, but we don't put together all the facts and see what is the missing element. So we are like the blind people defining the elements by different parts of the element without knowing that the elephant is something different from what we see. So now, first 3 sets are global facts and 7 sets are national, in Bharatiya facts. Let us look at what is this earth space and the land that is available. The earth space is 29%, sea is 71%. All of us we know. Next, the habitable land is 20.6%, and out of which the agricultural land is 10.3%. Out of which the agricultural land that is used for meat farming is 3/4, more than 3/4. That which is used for crop farming is less than 1/4. Now I will go into the second fact. What is the output of this farmland? The 1/4 farmland which is used for crop farming gives you 82% of the calories and 63% of the protein, and more than 3/4 of the farmland which is used for meat gives you just 18% calories and just 37% protein. You know what it contributes? 1 kg of meat produces 10 to 100 times, 10 to 100 times the CO2 emission which is attributed to crops. You can understand how the world food style is arranged, how the world culture looks at food. And now, if you translate it into more understandable terms, each unit of crop farm yields 16 times more calorie than meat farm, and for which you devote 3/4 and more than 3/4 of the land, and it is protein efficient by 5 times. Keep this in mind. These are all the global facts, unchallenged. If you want to look at where the facts are to be gathered from, it is from our world in data.com, which is one of the most trusted resourceful sites in the world. Now, I will come to Bharat related facts. We have just 2.4% of the global land area, just 2.4%. We have almost 18% of global population, and we have 30% of cattle population. The bovine population in India is 30%. To go into the number, it is 300 million, and the entire livestock is 535 million, perhaps the highest in the world, save perhaps Brazil. Next, the plant and animals, the what is called the bioresources is 8%. If you look at what is America, which is 3.5 times the size of India, China, which is 3.5 times the size of India, of course, the American human population is just 4.2%, we are 18%, and of course, China and we have an equal population. But the cattle population in America is just 9%, and the cattle population in China is also 9%. See the ecological condition in the world. These are all big countries. So, if you look at the total farmland in India, it is just 10% of the global farmland. 1% of the global land translates into 10% of the global farmland. Now, how does Bharat live on 2.4% of the global land with 18% humans, 30% bovines, 8% birds and animals, up to 21% forest coverage? This is a wonder. Has anyone gone into this? What has made this possible? Certainly not government regulations, certainly not laws, certainly not forest protection forces. And this bovine population we had kept when we had no food. In 1960s, 62 to 71, we had very little food. We didn't have food to eat. We depended on PL 480 imports. We didn't kill the animals. Why? Do we understand this? Now let us go to, if you were to answer this in one word, it is lifestyle, which the Prime Minister talks about. So this lifestyle issue is a matter of, like in macroeconomics, you look at what is the GDP, what is the employment, what is the price levels, that reflects that the economy is functioning well. But if the lifestyle is reflected in terms of millions and millions of animals with crores and crores of people living together, that shows that this principle is a live and working principle. It's not a theory, it's not a slogan. Now let us go to how we are able to manage this. You know, our cereal consumption is 168 kilos per annum per head. Our meat consumption is 3.5 kg per annum per head. It actually has come down as compared to many. I was myself surprised when I did the research, because more and more Indian women seem to be not willing to cook at home, and so we see so many biryani stores outside. But actually from 5.1 kg in 2002, it has come down to 3.1 meat consumption. So, but if you look at America, if you look at China, the American meat consumption is 124 kg per annum per head, and cereal consumption is 80. And they need the cereal because they don't get calories, they don't get protein. All this talk that meat gives you protein is fake. It is proved. Even for them, cereal is needed. But the whole world thinks meat is produced. I am not against meat. In India also we have 2/3 of meat consumers. But they know when to consume, what to consume. It is for us sabji. For us the main food is cereal. Sabji is meat. And for them the main food is meat. The add-on is cereal. You know, this shift has meant, of course in China it is cereal is 112 kg and meat is 61 kg. If you translate into the ratio between meat and cereal, in India we consume 44 times cereal as compared to meat, and China 1.84 times only, and America consumes only 0.64 times. You know what is the effect of this? The food culture of India transforms into farming culture. This is what I am going to say later, that there is a philosophy in operation which makes you your choices. What to eat, what not to eat. These are all personal choices. There is a tradition, there is a philosophy, there is a way of life, which I will go into later, how it is a linkage, an unbroken linkage. And it is not something which can be driven by market. It cannot be driven by education, it can be disturbed by education. It can be disturbed by public discourse. It can be disturbed by government policies. It can be disturbed by liberalism. But the most important thing is it can be preserved only by a philosophy and a way of life lived consistent with that and supervised by the society. This is an important factor which I am going to emphasize. And now, if our food habits change into American food habits, all of us go and eat McDonald's and burgers, we will need 6 times the agricultural land we have. We will need 6 times the agricultural land we have. If the whole world shifts to the Western way of eating, it will need 140% of the agricultural land it has. If the whole world shifts to the Indian way of eating, we will need only 40% of the agricultural land we are using today. Do we understand what India can contribute to the world? These are all the Newtonian facts which are not known. Apple falling facts which are not known because we are not willing to study. We have been taught what to study, what not to study, which source study, which universities to study, which research scholars to follow. We have been reduced into a highly illiterate society. Though for thousands of years this knowledge has been passed on, working on the ground, which is coming out as figures. Now, I am asking one question. Can Bharat exist without our food culture? Has this ever been discussed? Food is supposed to be, it's my right to eat what I want. I mean, this we allow unchallenged. It's not that nobody said here you have to eat only vegetarians. No, we have non-vegetarians. They eat non-vegetarian. There is no restriction on them. But even a non-vegetarian in India will not eat on a Saturday or Monday or Tuesday or an Amavasya. I mean, please understand, these are all self-imposed cultural restrictions which only preserved this bovine population. Otherwise, we would have eaten like others. Next point is, if I have told you that if Bharat's food habit is adopted by the world, it will need only 40% of the agricultural land. You can see the extent to which the CO2 gas emission will collapse. We need not have to have this great theory, great conventions and great meetings. I am not saying we should impose it on them. At least tell them that we have a functioning model, it's working here. Do we do it? Then, actually, I made a calculation, it's not complete. If the whole world follows Indian model of food, we will have net zero achieved with surplus. I mean, please ask somebody to work on it, my work is halfway. Then, it doesn't stop with that. It's not that we live with nature in comfort. we also live with fellow human beings in comfort. Of course, I am not going into the fact that we have millions and millions of gods and ways of worship, and it is one of the countries with the least mass violence in the world. If you want, you can have a look at R.J. Rummel's study, Power Kills. He has captured 2,500 years of the world history and said till the 13th century there has never been a mass violence in India. Whereas mass violence in the world has produced or has resulted in 1.2 billion massacres. 1.2 billion. He said there is nothing in India. So there is a way of life. If you are kind to an animal, you will never be unkind to human beings. This is a philosophy, philosophic continuity. And now, how we live with our family. Just I will give you two examples. See our housing. The average number of people living in a family in India is about 4.5. And the total number of households is 307 million. In America, what this means, nobody knows. In America, they had in 1960 3.1 persons per household. Today it is 2.51. This 0.6% reduction meant a construction of 35 million more houses at a cost of 8.5 trillion, and the environmental cost unestimated. You look at India. If 4.5 persons per household comes down by 1, we will need 54 million more houses. If it comes to the American level, we will need 144 million more houses. Can you afford it? You don't have a place. You don't have money. You will finish your environment. Do we understand it? How families being together, the integration, relationship. We are not a contract-based society. We are a relation-based society. Contract and relation are two different things. Of course, the modernists will say contract-based society is modern, relation-based society is traditional, unmodern, anti-modern, backward. But do they understand the impact that it produces? Now, social security. You know, I would like to cite you a very important transition period in the American economy, which was recorded by the National Bureau of Economic Research as the American economy in transition. That is probably the American economy took a turn for the worse and made the whole world to turn for the worse. There, Milton Friedman was one of the speakers. He said, don't bring universal social security. And you make it targeted. Those who need it, give it. Don't give universal social security. Don't interfere between the intergenerational responsibilities of people. An economist saying it, a Nobel laureate saying it. One of the person who expounded the idea of monetary theory, which has been lost now, the man who stabilized the American economy in 1982, 83, 84, he said, don't interfere in the intergenerational responsibilities of people. His idea was thrown into the dustbin by politicians who wanted only votes. So they introduced universal social security. When the baby booming was there, more people contributed to the social security than people who were withdrawing. So the Americans were so happy, but the Americans stopped producing children. So what happened? The number of contributories have come down, the number of people who withdraw has gone up. In 2000, from 2006 onwards, there is greater withdrawal than deposits into social security. You know what is the calculation today? Unless the social security tax is increased from 12.5% to 16.5%, the deficit in social security account, the present value of the future social security is $63 trillion is the deficit. It is a dynamite under the American economy. Which politician has the courage in America to lift the social security tax from 12.5 to 16.5? He will never get elected. And the man who gets elected can never do it. It's like falling, it's a honeybee falling in a honey pot. It can never come out. If it doesn't come out, it's over. You know, this is being spread all over the world. And the entire stock markets have invested. All these funds have invested in stock markets. The stock market has to keep up going. It is not dependent on bank returns. So the stock market have to go up. See how we are caught. And that model is being brought here. I am not saying it should not be brought here. Be careful. Somebody must warn. So, if you look at the social security, how we live, is this an accident? Has all this happened by accident? Or is there a mind working? Shoemaker asked, in his Small is Beautiful, a question which the world missed. He said the entire universe is functioning like this. Is it functioning mindlessly, or is there a mind behind it? This is the question he asked. Of course, the American thinkers who led the global thinking never thought there is a mind working apart from their own. With the result, a mindless process took over the world. Market. I am not against market. I am making use of market. I am defining market. I know where to limit the market. There are two theories about market. A market economy and a market society. The American society is regarded as a market society because it has brought in market even into the family. But the Asian societies are regarded as market economy because they have stopped the market outside the home. This is a new theory. I have not seen the Indian academia even discussing about it. When I spoke in the IIT about it, they were not even aware. The extent of our intellectual deficit is astounding. Now, I will tell you how this model is working and handed down. It's a civilizational continuity for millennia. And it is based on a philosophy of respect for nature, respect for parents, respect for elders, respect for teachers, respect for women. These are all the things which sustained India. And philosophy sets the goal of life. I am giving you how, by what chain this has been made functional. Philosophy sets the goal of life. The goal of life defines the lifestyle. The lifestyle results in your habits. Your habits determine your wants, production, and consumption. This is the link. Unless we understand this link, how is this model functioning? How is this environmentally compatible model is functioning? A peaceful model is functioning. A relation-based model is functioning. There is a trade-off. Everybody trades off with their family, their individual rights. Tyajatyegam kulasyarte gramarte kulam tejet gramam janapadasyarte atmarte prithvim tejet is a verse in Mahabharata thousands of years ago, that you yield to the interest of the family yields to the interest of the village yields to the interest of the nation, and the only man who need not yield to anybody is a man who doesn't want anything from the world. No one like that. So there is a huge trade-off in the society, and that trade-off is sustaining us. You know, I come from a village. Unless you come from a village, you cannot understand India. I can dare say this. In my village, nobody will cut a tree if there is a pregnant woman, unless you take permission from that family. Because when a tree is cut, a life is lost. In our homes even today, we cannot whitewash our houses if there is a pregnant woman, because there are many insects which will die. Do you see the integration between us and nature? We were one with them. This is Advaita in practice. Do we understand this? For us to tell the world is now looking at India. The world wants to know, how is India rising? But should we not say we are rising because of this? Or are we rising because of other things? Of course, other things do contribute. So my feeling is that we have got to put together all these facts to understand what is behind the falling apple phenomenon, so that we understand. The NITI Aayog's founding resolution, as I told you, talks about reverence for nature, social capital, and Bharatiya model for development. It is a combination, it is this combination of social and environmental behavioral capital that is linked to the lifestyle. This is a product of a philosophy and a goal of life based on that. And there are challenges to it. You know, the whole world talks about, this is the concluding part, because this is a challenge which we have to face. Every think tank will have to face. Indian public discourse and academia will have to face. Because this whole structure on the one side, based on trade-off, which is based on a combination of rights and duties. My mind goes to 1946, when H.G. Wells sent his Universal Declaration of Human Rights draft to Mahatma Gandhi. I don't think it is taught in our schools or colleges. It's not spoken in our public discourse. I don't think any think tank has even published a paper on that. Mahatma Gandhi returned it saying that you change the title from Universal Declaration of Human Rights into Universal Declaration of Human Duties, I will sign. If you want to destroy duties which have sustained the entire human civilization, I am not going to be a party to it. That is the regime which has started destroying the world, the social capital, the civilizational capital. And India's rise will have to U-turn this, because our functioning model of the society is duty-based. Otherwise, the society won't last, this economy won't last. If universal, so if the sons and daughters of, I will show you what it is. The NSSO survey says 50% of all married couples above the age of 65 with children, 45% of all widows, 80% of all widows and widowers are taken care of by their children. If they do not have the sense of duty to take care, they will all be in front of the NITI Aayog and Narendra Modi for 2 square meals a day. There will be no India. Do we understand it? Does our economics understand it? Does our think tanks understand it? These are all the Newtonian falling apple facts, which are so naked before you. So, the NITI Aayog has a big challenge. And the challenge I will set out now, you know, the United Nations, it talks about the world is now about diverse world, you know, there is diverse religions, diverse people, diverse races, diverse cultures. You know, the word diverse entered the United Nations dictionary only in 2001. Till then it was one size fits all Western model. Give up your culture, give up your philosophy, give up your way of life and become like us. It is only in the Universal Cultural Convention that the cultural rights were recognized. And there was a rider. If there is a conflict between culture and human rights will prevail. You know, human rights is not fundamental rights which you claim against the government. Human rights is a right which the child claims against the parent. The son claims against the parent. Husband claims against the wife. Wife claims against the... These are all personal rights. Why are you making it universal? And to talk about against human rights is a sin today. I will talk about it. There is a conflict between the way our economics is organized, society is organized, environmentalism is organized, the trade-off between human and nature is organized. Human rights will destroy all this. This is a matter for think tanks to get into it. What are the limits to it? So the NITI Aayog must at least come out with, because it is not according to me bound by any of these things. If human rights conflicts with the way our environmentalism works, it must say it works. Whether the government accepts, the media accepts, or anybody accepts, you shouldn't be bothered. You must say, yes, it does. If you think it does, as I do. The next is, it must suggest modalities in our economics, sociology, and environmental teachings and discourse. And it must go far. And the contemporary discourse on human rights versus traditional families. What I am talking about is not contractual families. I am talking about traditional families which are run on the principles of sacred duties. So it's a big job. So all that we are talking about is being challenged in the public discourse. And the global discourse, an opportunity has come for us to tell the world that we are different. If you want, you follow us. Don't ask us to follow you. This should be the model. Now I am back to Aurobindo to say, you empty your mind and begin thinking afresh. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. That was indeed a very, very scintillating, rich, idea-rich, and a power-packed, full of data, facts, and certainly brings us back to square one. Are we in the right path? I think it's a very important watershed moment, even for NITI Aayog, to look at the important ideas that you have put in front of us. So thank you so much for that. And I would request the audience again to give a thunderous, warm applause. So I understand there's a shortage of time from your side, but if it is okay with you, sir, we would request the audience to, if there anybody in the audience who would like to ask a questions. There, I think Saili Udas there. Yes.
So I'm Saili, I'm a senior consultant here. So you spoke about, this is really, really very overwhelming and, a lot of facts for us to observe and to inculcate. But as people working in the policy, what do you think is that starting point for, young people like us when we start thinking about what you just said? Like, how do we start? Because there's so much that you put to us. So how do you think, what is the way we should start thinking about this?
See, I don't know the way the NITI Aayog functions. But is there a way to circulate, say, one's personal paper for discussions among people? Is there scope in NITI Aayog? Then you must be, see, Neil Bohr, one of the Nobel laureates, said, when I read the Upanishads, it makes me ask questions. This is a society which has grown by asking questions, the right questions, of course. So we should ask questions. We should question ourselves. We should question the government policies. We should question the public discourse. We should question different policies within us. And then come out with our own position papers, exposure drafts. If there is a way of circulating exposure drafts, it's not necessary it has any association with the organization. In fact, exposure drafts are sometimes dangerous. In fact, one exposure draft, I don't want to name the institution because I belong to it, it came out saying that the US Federal Reserve raising the interest rates will mean $100 billion flying out of India. I was stunned because this was based on a 1995 research of pull and push theory. I don't know how many of you who understand this, monetary, that is financial theory. If the American economy raised the interest rates, the money will be pulled back into America. If the American economy reduces the interest rates, it will be pushed back. This theory has no validity because today $25 trillion of American money is domesticated outside America. It is not under the control of the US Federal Reserve System. So the pull and push theory has no value. But still we apply the same theory because we have not questioned it. So we have to question many of these past theories, and this comes out naturally if you are not in the beaten path.
So I think the time is very less, and we would be very keen to hear our Vice Chairman, who would, his concluding remarks, I think, will give NITI's own view of how to take it forward. May I now request our Honorable VC, Mr. Suman Beriji, to please come on stage. Sorry for cutting short the questions, but I guess I can see many raised hands, but the paucity of time dictates that we move forward. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir, very much for honoring us by your presence. And I understand that you may have to return to Chennai this evening, so I will also respect the timing of the session. You have given us a lot of food for thought about NITI Aayog and its culture, if I could call it that, its spirit of inquiry. Let me just react as somebody who has not had the privilege of being brought up in an Indian village, who's been brought up in the city of Delhi, as it happens, and whose training has been substantially affected, and I'll make no secret of it, by what I might call the Enlightenment tradition. Now, I think what we've been grappling with here in NITI Aayog is what to make of Honorable Prime Minister's injunction for India to aim to be a Viksit Bharat, a modern society, by 2047. And I have been in the forefront arguing to my colleagues that the Prime Minister is talking about a modern society. He is not talking about growth rates. And so I think the fundamental challenge that you put before NITI Aayog is, what does it mean to define modernity while drawing upon these wellsprings of tradition? You, towards the end, I think, made an extremely important point about the nature of knowledge and the quest for knowledge in India, which is questioning and ambiguity tolerance, rather than the sense that there are absolute answers. And I would say that that, to me, is an injunction to NITI Aayog, that the question is really more important than the certainty. And I think that that is an injunction or an instruction from you that we would very much take to heart. I think that the opposition that you posed between, as it were, duties and rights was very penetrating, and I would have to say that I hadn't thought of it in these ways, in this way. And if I heard you right, the central importance of the family as a social unit, rather than the individual, which is really where the Enlightenment took us, is another of the insights that I got out of your address. And finally, I would say that, quite apart from intellectual curiosity and intellectual inquiry. Ultimately, I saw you as urging us to be self-confident in the tradition that we come from. And here I have to say I would hope to learn from my colleagues, because in many ways I think that they represent a new generation that has that confidence. It is aspirational. I want to be respectful of your time, sir, but thank you so much for providing such deeply felt and sharp insights for us. Thank you very much.
Now I'll request Mr. Yugal Joshi, who's MD Mission Life, sir. In fact, this idea was incubated in NITI Aayog, and he's MD, to give a vote of thanks.
नमस्कार सर। एक भारतीय मनीषी परंपरा है जो ऋग्वेद के दृष्टा से लेकर उपनिषद काल से होती हुई आज तक चली आती है। सर ने जो आज व्याख्यान दिया ये उसी परंपरा में आगे की कड़ी है। ऋग्वेद में एक श्लोक आता है जिसमें एक पीपल के पेड़ पर दो पक्षियों की कहानी है, एक बेरी का फल खा रहा है और दूसरा उसे देख रहा है। बहुत ही अद्भुत कथा है और ये बताती है कि हमें हमारे हर एक्शन के लिए किस तरह से आज का ही नहीं भविष्य का भी सोचना चाहिए। सर ने जो भारतीय विविधता, परंपरा और उन पर जियोपॉलिटिक्स में 5 सिद्धांतों का जो एक अद्भुत समन्वय हमें दिखाया, उस पर चिंतन करने, मनन करने की आवश्यकता है और मेरे ख्याल से हर एक के लिए इसमें बहुत सारे टेकअवेज हैं। मैं माननीय राष्ट्रीय सुरक्षा सलाहकार अजीत डोभाल जी का भी बहुत आभारी हूँ। साथ ही आभारी हूँ अपने वाइस चेयरमैन नीति आयोग महोदय का, जिनके अभिभावकत्व में यह सब संपन्न हुआ। सभी मेंबर्स का मैं बहुत आभारी हूँ जिनके गाइडेंस में हम यह कार्यक्रम कर सके, और मैं बहुत आभारी हूँ अपने सीईओ साहब का, जिनके नेतृत्व में, जिनकी लीडरशिप में, जिनके मार्गदर्शन में ही यह सब संभव हो सका। सभी भारत सरकार के सचिवों का, यूएनआरसी भी यहाँ पर हैं, बलबीर पुंजी भी हैं, सबका मैं बहुत बहुत आभार प्रकट करता हूँ। मैं आभार प्रकट करता हूँ साथ ही हमारी एडिशनल सेक्रेटरी राधा मैम का, जिन्होंने बहुत ही सुंदरता से इस कार्यक्रम का संचालन किया, नीति आयोग के सभी मेरे कलीग्स का और एनडीएमसी के और उन सभी लोगों का जिन्होंने यह कार्यक्रम सफल बनाया। अंत में सर एक बार पुनः आपका बहुत बहुत आभार। हमारे कार्यक्रम के लिए आप सुबह चेन्नई से आए हैं और अब वापस चेन्नई भी जाना है सर। हम बहुत हृदय से आपके आभारी हैं सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। आप लोगों के लिए एक सूक्ष्म जलपान की हाई टी की व्यवस्था लेवल 1 और लेवल 2 में की गई है। मेरा बहुत आपसे अनुग्रह है कि कृपया जलपान के लिए पधारें। बहुत धन्यवाद।